Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on Água, Viva by Clarice Lispector, which is an absolutely incredible book. It is a collection of aphorisms. It is a series of meditations on life and art, on truth and perception. There are strange interludes on flowers and animals, but across all of these pages, it is simultaneously a cri de coeur and an absolute dagger into Lispector's consciousness, into her very soul. So if you have not yet read Água, Viva, I cannot encourage you enough. Please go try to find a copy, explore what Lispector is doing across these roughly 88, 90 pages, because there are gems on every page, nearly in every sentence. It is an extraordinary book. It is not really a novel. Yes, Lispector speaks with this first-person voice as sort of a narrator, but it is more that of the voice of a prophet, a la the voices that we find in the Hebrew Bible or in Koheleth from Ecclesiastes or in the book of Job. It is a voice comparable to that Nietzsche strives for in Thus Spake Zarathustra, much more even than an I novel that we've seen across the 20th century, particularly in Japan. But this book is extraordinary. I want to just read a couple of pages, or 1 or 2 or 12, to give a sense of what Lispector's getting at in this book. She writes, "The true thought seems to have no author. And beatitude has that same quality. Beatitude starts in the moment when the act of thinking has freed itself from the necessity of form. Beatitude starts at the moment when the thinking feeling has surpassed the author's need to think. He no longer needs to think and now finds himself close to the grandeur of the nothing. I could say of the everything, but everything is a quantity, and quantity has a limit in its very beginning. The true incommensurability is the nothing, which has no barriers and where a person can scatter their thinking feeling." And rarely has a combination of sort of philosophy, existentialist exploration, a demand for meaning in life found such a beautiful expression and articulation as we have here. Lispector writes, "Do I have a plot to my life? For I am unexpectedly fragmentary. I am piecemeal. My story is living, and I have no fear of failure. Let failure annihilate me. I want the glory of falling. My crippled angel who contorts all elusive. My angel who fell from the heavens to the hell where he lives, savoring evil. This is not a story because I don't know any stories like this. But all I know how to do is go along saying and doing. It is the story of instants that flee like fugitive tracks seen from the window of a train." And you note, I'm actually reading these in a reverse order. There is a sense of order to many of these, where there'll be, the aphorisms are almost broken in paragraphs. Some are only a single sentence long, but these could be read in many different orders. And I think that's part of the beauty of the work. And Lispector herself kind of pushes at this idea that perhaps the disordering that can exist is part of our lives' experiences. She writes about wanting to be a painter and how to express through art and painting, and then rather, now that she's using words, how are the syllables that make up words similar to the colors that made up paint? She writes, "And I often paint caves, and if I often paint caves, that is because they are my plunge into the earth, dark but haloed with brightness. And I, blood of nature, extravagant and dangerous caves, talisman of the earth, where stalactites, fossils, and rocks come together, and where the animals, mad by their own malign nature, seek refuge. The caves are my hell. Forever dreaming cave with its fogs, memory, or longing. Eerie, esoteric, greenish with the slime of time. Inside the dark cave glimmer the hanging rats with the cruciform wings of bats. I see downy and black spiders. Mice and rats run frightened along the ground and up the walls, between the rocks of the scorpion. Crabs, just like themselves since prehistory, through deaths and births, would look like threatening beasts if they were the size of a man. Old cockroaches crawl in the murky light. And all of this is me. All is weighted with sleep, and when I paint a cave or write to you about it, from outside it comes the clatter of dozens of wild horses stamping with dry hoofs the darkness, and from the thick friction of the hoofs the rejoicing is freed in sparks. Here I am, I into the cave, in the very time that will rot us." That's an absolutely extraordinary passage. The imagery she draws on there, the sounds, the combination of image and sound that she's fusing together is just extraordinary. She writes, "As if ripping from the depths of the earth the knotted roots of a rare tree, that's how I write to you. And those roots as if they were powerful tentacles like voluminous naked bodies of strong women entwined by serpents and by carnal desires for fulfillment. And all this is the prayer of a black mass and a creeping plea for amen, because the bad is unprotected and needs the approval of God. That is creation." Her vision of reality is simultaneously extraordinary and terrifying. But these high summer days of damnation whisper to me the need for renunciation. I renounce having a meaning, and then the sweet and painful weakness grips me. Round and round shapes cross in the air. It's a summer heat. I navigate in my galley that braves the winds of a bewitched summer. Crushed leaves remind me of the ground of my childhood. The green hand and the golden breasts. That is how I paint the mark of Satan. They who fear us and our alchemy stripped witches and sorcerers in search of the hidden mark that was almost always found, though it could only be known on sight, for that mark was indescribable and unpronounceable even in the darkness of the Middle Ages. Middle Ages, thou art my dark subjacency, and in the glare of the bonfires the marked ones dance in circles, riding branches and foliage, which are the phallic symbols of fertility. Even in the white mass, blood is used, and there it is drunk. And there's this consistent draw on this idea of a white mass or a black mass that Lispector, throughout these meditations, is trying to find a place in the reality she perceives for herself. And as she does that, she's simultaneously trying to project this idea out to a reader. And what's fascinating is these feel like words that she's writing as much to herself as she is to any external audience. It's almost this dialogue between aspects of her personality or of her mind, or of, I should say, the narrator's mind or personality, yet it feels so close to a potential version of Lispector. And so it's just an extraordinary book. And there was that one very late in the book where she says, the true thought seems to have no author. And here is another critical one. It's sort of our ideas at the core of this book. She writes, the most important word in the language has two letters, is, I-S. I am at its core, I still am. I am at the living and soft center. And that to me recalls the phrase Yahweh, something that she notes in a later on when she quotes from Genesis, referring to the Garden of Eden. She notes something about Yahweh there, and I think there that I am, that is, that sense of being, that verb is critical, because Lispector, while growing up in Brazil, had been originally born in Ukraine and grew up in a Jewish family. And so that there are these ways in which, as I had mentioned, that there are aspects of Água Viva that I think very strongly recall the type of voice, that command, that musing, but that deep like authority behind the music, the musing and the reflection that recalls the Hebrew prophets or Koheleth from Ecclesiastes. And I think there that is an explicit call on, how Yahweh refers to himself in the Hebrew Bible. I have an important thing to tell you, because I am not joking. It is the pure element, material of the instant of time. I am not objectivizing anything. I am having the real birth of it. I feel faint, like someone about to be born. She goes on, I am giving freedom to you. First I rip the sac of fluid, then I cut the umbilical cord, and you are alive on your own account. And when I am born, I become free. That is the foundation of my tragedy. And that foundation of tragedy is ultimately what reveals this absolutely extraordinary work. I want to read one last longer passage. I suddenly got so distressed that I might just say enough already and finish what I'm writing to you. It's more based on blind words. Even for unbelievers, there's the instant of despair that is divine. The absence of the God is an act of religion. At this very instant, I'm asking the God to help me. I'm needing more than human strength. I'm strong, but also destructive. The God must come to me since I haven't gone to him. Let the God come, please. Though I don't deserve it, come. Or perhaps those who least deserve him need him most. I'm restless and harsh and hopeless, though I have love inside myself. It's just that I don't know how to use love. Sometimes it scratches like barbs. If I receive so much love inside me and nonetheless am restless, it's because I need the God to come before it's too late. I'm in danger like every person who lives, and the only thing I can expect is precisely the unexpected. But I know that I shall have peace before death, and that one day I shall taste the delicateness of life. I shall notice as we eat and live the taste of food. My voice falls into the abyss of your silence. You read me in silence. But in this unlimited silent field, I unfurl my wings, free to live. So I accept the worst and enter the core of death, and that is why I am alive. And Lispector was writing this across sort of the final years of her life, and she spent a lot of time going back, revising, reworking components. She wrote between when she sort of wrote the first ideas that she was going to express in Água Viva, there was a whole book written, or one or two whole books written and published. And yet this final late publication is just absolutely extraordinary. One of the great works, I think, of the 20th century. So I'm very grateful to have read it. This translation is from Stefan Tobler. And I had mentioned a couple of works that came to mind. I had mentioned Nietzsche. Nietzsche as a writer of aphorisms, and someone who I think was also trying to adopt aspects of sort of that prophetic voice that we find in the Hebrew Bible. Thus spake Zarathustra. And this is probably slightly closer. While Beyond Good and Evil is definitely a book of aphorisms that Água Viva, is as well. The voice within Zarathustra, I think, is much closer to what Lispector was exploring than the voice in Beyond Good and Evil. Thinking of works that are fictional works that recalled this, I thought certainly of Last Words from Montmartre by Chiu Miajin. This is again a work, it's really a series of letters. And the letters can be taken and exchanged in position. And Miajin was very explicit about saying there's not really a particular order. If you want to read them in a different order, just as you could read the aphorisms, so many of the aphorisms, probably 90% of them in Água Viva could be exchanged, and it would still retain all of its just authorial power and voice. And that is equally true about Chiu Miajin. This is also a very dark vision of reality. It's much more focused on love and on personal identity, and yet the sort of all-consuming vision, similar to what Shelley is exploring in The Triumph of Life, is very close to what Lispector is doing in Água Viva. Another one that is a novel would be No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. And this is very much one of the Japanese I novels. And so that I authorial voice is similar to what Lispector is doing. Again, a very dark, harrowing vision of the world, of feeling so separate from the world that one no longer feels human. Whereas I think what Lispector is doing in Água Viva is trying to find the connection with not only humanity, but nature as a whole, and inserting herself and trying to let that fountain overflow in Água Viva. Another work might be sort of those deep, powerful, almost maniacal monologues that Thomas Bernhard can do, particularly here in Gargoyles, where the final 100 or so pages are this long, rambling, raving from a prince in Austria. I had mentioned, of course, the writers like in Ecclesiastes, within the book of Job, certain aspects of the Hebrew prophets as well. And the way that those, the prophets are speaking with the voice of God, of Yahweh or of El, there is a deep power behind their words, just as there are within Lispector's words. And I think she's very much is writing within sort of that context of having read Jewish scriptures over and over throughout her childhood. Another work, one that I'm currently reading, that feels very similar to what Lispector is doing, particularly when she writes about mirrors, or the idea of trying to paint a mirror. And as soon as you insert something, that you can see in the mirror, can you paint a blank mirror itself? Because what would that look like? Because the mirror should always be reflecting something, correct? And so some of the musings she has there, some of the ideas around time, around existence, around her own perception, certainly recall what Mircea Cartarescu is doing in Solenoid. I will say I preferred Água Viva to what the 2/3 of Solenoid that I've read so far, but this will be coming soon. On a similar vein, the Diaries of Franz Kafka, there is a very personal nature to Água Viva, and so I think that feels like we're being given someone's personal thoughts, someone's secret thoughts, most true thoughts, the true thoughts that, as Lispector said, seem to have no author. That feels close to what Kafka was expressing in his diaries, that very much, again, were written for himself, not for public consumption. Some of the ideas she explores feel close to, sort of oblique, a term she herself uses, to ideas Jorge Luis Borges was exploring in many of his stories. And then I'll close by a short reading from Hafiz, a great Persian poet. And these are two of his poems. He writes, "It is written on the gate of heaven, nothing in existence is more powerful than destiny, and destiny brought you here, to this page, which is part of your ticket, as all things are, to return to God. But the one right before that says, the earth is a host that murders its guests. But what can die? All dying just removes more of the husk over the soul's vision. All dying thins the veil over a wondrous world within. And I think that is what Lispector was doing on those pages. She was giving of herself and giving of her most inmost self and psyche and soul to thin the veil of the wondrous world that lies in each of our existences and in the world around us that we perhaps don't always take the time to or the energy to perceive. So let me know if you've read this. Let me know if you have favorite works from Lispector, and I hope everybody's having a great day. Thank you.